Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Weekend Review. This show was recorded on Monday, June 27, 2022. I'm Hovik Manucharyan here with Asbed Bedrossian. Before we begin the show, we'd like to request that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. We're very active on Facebook, both as a group and a page. And also subscribe and rate our podcasts, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts from, whether that's Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. All our Groom links are on our Linktree page, and we'll make sure you can find that on all of our social profile pages, so you can click on that and follow us on all social media platforms. So if you like our shows, please share with your friends and follow us everywhere you are used to getting your news. That helps us a lot. Thanks, and on with the show. Here are the major topics we'll touch on today. Who killed the OSCE Minsk Group? We'll discuss diplomatic developments in the region, how balances of power may have shifted recently, and what is going to be the future of the OSCE Minsk Group. Murders in Aparan. We'll talk about the case of at least two individuals murdered in Aparan and allegations that they were based on political grounds. Arthur Vanetsyan resigns from parliament. We'll discuss Arthur Vanetsyan's resignation and how that may affect the opposition or resistance movement. And lastly, Gagik Jhangiryan in the line of fire. We'll discuss what Gagik Jhangiryan has done or hasn't done since last week to clear his name. And to talk about these issues, we have with us Hrant Mikaelian, a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. He's also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Hello and welcome, Hrant. Great to have you on the show again.
Hello, Hrant.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
So let's begin with some of the diplomatic news this week. The Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov was in Baku. This followed an earlier visit last week to Yerevan. Meanwhile, top diplomats from the EU and the US have been visiting the region as well, including Toivo Klar, the EU Special Rep for the South Caucasus, and Karen Donfried, Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs in the US. The level of diplomatic activity is certainly out of the ordinary, in my opinion. In Baku, one of the main stated purposes of Lavrov's visit was the regulation of the Artsakh conflict, but he made a few noteworthy comments that I'd like to bring up. First, Russia again blamed the US and France for the suspension of the work of the OSCE Minsk Group. Donfried has denied this and said they're willing to work in that framework. And in another statement, Lavrov said that Russian enterprises, presumably I'm interpreting this to mean also state-run enterprises, though I'm not sure, are interested in post-conflict rebuilding of Azerbaijani territories. So Hrant, I wanted to ask you if you see any shift in the Russian position since the start of the war in Ukraine. And also, who killed the OSCE Minsk Group, if that is indeed the case?
Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, I think there is shift in Russian position. The main shift is that Russians significantly decreased their attention towards Artsakh and towards South Caucasus at all. And we've seen that they relocated some of their military from Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and probably Artsakh as well, and deployed them towards Ukraine. And this limits ability to project power in the zone of conflict. And at the same time, of course, this makes Russians, let's say, less insisting on their position. And they started to care much less about Karabakh, which means that since the Russians are mediator, their position was dominating at some point, but now balance of powers between Armenia and Azerbaijan started affecting situation in the conflict area more, because now Russians are less likely to intervene and to involve. So their position, Russia's position, is let's say switching towards more pro-Azerbaijani, because in reality, troublemaker in this conflict has always been Azerbaijan, pushing for military solution and then for ultimate pro-Azerbaijani solution, and that's what they are doing right now. And since Russian military deployment in Artsakh had to prevent Azerbaijanis from continuation of aggression against Artsakh, now they are less likely to do that. And for them, the price of peace in the Caucasus has increased, and provider of that peace as well as of the war can be Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is most likely to start a war, if any. And that's why Russians are trying to negotiate with Azerbaijan to prevent them starting war, and let's say putting Russia into very difficult and hard to find solution situation. That's why Russians are more likely to listen to Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, that's what we observe. And in reality, we see not only that, but also that Russian willingness to cooperate with France and United States within Minsk Group format has also decreased. Beforehand, they would tolerate France and United States, but now their positions in many other fields are so different that it's hard to cooperate even within Minsk Group, where they still don't find very many differences in their approaches.
Hrant, when you say that the price of peace has increased and, to a certain degree Azerbaijan can holds the cards in keeping the peace going, is this an unexpected outcome for Russia? Did they miscalculate when they went to their so-called special operations into Ukraine, that they didn't know what was going to happen in the South Caucasus?
I think here in Armenia we knew that, because when all the discussions on possible war in Ukraine started in February 2022, it was obvious that if Russia is stacking there, Azerbaijan can try to find a momentum for projecting power, occupying new territories, which they did. Now, concerning Russians, for them, Ukrainian track and let's say Western track for them, Ukraine, Belarus, and now around Kaliningrad is so important that when they are diving into that, they don't even think about other directions. So I assume that they did not go deep into what repercussions Ukrainian war might have in the South Caucasus.
Interesting.
I might be wrong, but that's what I think.
Do you think there are parallels between the corridor through Lithuania to Kaliningrad? Has any kind of parallels to anything going on in the South? Anything going on in the South Caucasus?
No, I think it's a separate story. It's already a long time story, which is escalating right now as Russian-Western relations are escalating. And I think Lithuania has made several controversial steps towards Russia and China. Probably their government has, let's say, some line in pair with their allies, but I don't think that has anything to do with the South Caucasus.
Hrant, an active and functioning OSCE Minsk Group seems to be critical for Armenia's interests. And while we know that Azerbaijan has always tried to kill the group, it looks like some of the positions that Armenia has had in the past have not helped. For instance, post-April war, Azerbaijan closed their offices in Baku and forced the closure of the group's offices in Yerevan. And after Nikol Pashinyan came to power, he seems to have conceded to Azerbaijan and stopped pushing for the observation and monitoring work, which was being negotiated as part of the Minsk Group agenda. And this was after the April 2016 war. And just last year, Pashinyan said that they will be working on a peace deal and submitting it to the OSCE Minsk Group for approval. A peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan does not seem to be the primary agenda of the OSCE Minsk Group. So what effect did this position have on the Minsk Group itself? Did it help or did it hurt?
Now, to be frank, I'm not sure, let's start with the state of affairs in the Minsk Group. The big issue is that during the 44-day war, Minsk Group did not find itself, let's say, enough powerful to make at least one joint statement that would condemn aggression. And Minsk Group had made very basic statements which do not correspond to the situation. They don't have any suggestions after the war, and also Azerbaijan has articulated boldly its position that Minsk Group does not exist anymore, which ends the same as Turkey's Erdogan did, even during the war. And Minsk Group did not find itself, let's say, strong enough to counter this approach. We can remember how a year ago Aliyev has tried to humiliate Minsk Group co-chairs, which came to Baku, and had no repercussions after that. So Minsk Group is obviously in crisis. I think the last strong chance for Minsk Group to let's say to remain main place to discuss Karabakh issue was track which started in late 2016, Vienna, St. Petersburg, and Geneva agreements, which were about the monitoring on the line of contact. And since Azerbaijan did not want this to happen, and Pashinyan also joined him in reality, and these agreements did not turn reality ultimately, and were cancelled in 2018, 2019. I think after that, Minsk Group was in crisis already. And now, even Russia does not want Minsk Group to operate. When Lavrov says that Minsk Group does not exist because of France and the US, we should primarily understand that Minsk Group does not exist because of Russia does not want it to exist. Because we have not heard the statements by French and US representatives of Minsk Group that they don't want Minsk Group to operate. So I think Russia, as of now, thinks that it might be more powerful without Minsk Group than within Minsk Group, because it's a major mediator. And also we see that EU as a body, as a Brussels, let's say, is trying to also become a mediator, which means that there is another new mediator in the Karabakh conflict, which is also not Minsk Group. So here is another problem, that Minsk Group is being disbanded effectively. Although we need it to operate, because all the normative base on which the independence of Artsakh or other status issues were discussed is there within OSCE Minsk Group, and all of the agreements and projects and so on were there, and there is no other place where this let's say issues could be discussed effectively. So Minsk Group, keeping Minsk Group alive is a vital issue for Armenia. Now, Pashinyan's approach was to prepare peace agreement with Azerbaijan. In reality, it was Azerbaijani approach which was pushed by force, and Pashinyan accepted it. At least if we believe him, his public statements, he said that yes, let's prepare peace deal and bring it to Minsk Group, which means in reality, if you would say that we're planning to prepare peace agreement within Minsk Group, that would mean that it tries to return to Minsk Group negotiation format, at least partially. But since he is planning to bring prepared peace document to the Minsk Group, I think he also does not want Minsk Group to operate. At least that's what I see there.
But what about all the statements saying that the status issue has not been resolved yet? Almost everybody except Azerbaijan has made that statement. So doesn't that mean, at least implicitly, that they want to go back to the Minsk Group platform?
I think we can understand it as, for example, Russia says that we need to discuss status issue, but in future, which means at least until the Ukrainian story is over, at least, and plus some time.
Possibly never.
Now,
sorry to say.
Who knows? Yeah, could be. And now, concerning other co-chairs, for the co-chairs, in reality, the status issue is not as crucial as for Armenia. When, for example, Pashinyan is saying that they force us to decrease our level of expectations, he does not understand what he says. I mean, every mediator will tell you that let's finish this conflict at any cost. And Aliyev also has quoted that they were trying to force him as well to go for concessions, which he did not do. But Pashinyan understands whatever they say, let's say, very directly, and is not able maybe to negotiate adequately. That's what I see. I don't see where he is able to negotiate, not only him, but also Hrant Mikaelian. Now, concerning status, yes, status is being discussed, but very, let's say, theoretically. I have not seen any practical discussion. And for that, we need, first of all, we need the working format of discussions, which has been Minsk Group, but it now does not work as such. And second, we need, let's say, real proposals for, let's say, resolving status issue. Azerbaijan says there will be no other status outside of Azerbaijan. Turkey is backing it up. Armenia says we need some status, does not specify which status. And concerning US, France, and Russia, they say yes, that status issue is not resolved, but nothing else. I mean, nothing specifically. And first of all, I think it should be Armenia's initiative, Armenia's proposals, and then it might be theoretically backed up by Europeans, Americans, or Russians.
I was actually going to ask you just that, Hrant. Is the lack of a proposal or a definition of what status means to Armenia part of the problem, actually?
I think yes. I think it's a long time issue for Armenia. It's not only issue which has turned out the last years. I think we were always lacking strategic view in Armenia, and if we look at for example, our strategy documents like national security conception and other documents, we can see that they are, let's say, very immature documents, not very well prepared, and there is no clear view. What do we want to see? What do we want to get? And how we're going to get there, but not even what, and not talking about how.
Okay.
And when we discuss strategy and tactics in Armenia, we don't discuss, for example, soft power issues. We don't discuss diplomacy. We only discuss what will be if we do, let's say, very, very basic things. I mean, it's a very low quality diplomacy, low quality strategic planning, and so on. And that is why we are losing this battle.
That I can completely agree with you. Absolutely.
Hrant, we'll discuss the resistance movement in a separate topic coming up, but since one of the stated goals of the movement is to prevent Artsakh from falling in the hands of Azerbaijan, what effect are the protests having on Pashinyan's position so far? The movement seems to be regrouping and working on building a more institutional framework, but how would you evaluate their success so far?
I think, in short, I would say this, too little and too late concerning opposition activities. Yes, they affected Pashinyan's policy to some extent, but not much. And we also see that Pashinyan is now giving up Berdzor, and he is ready to agree for new corridor for Azerbaijan, for Artsakh through Azerbaijan, which is a road which Azerbaijan is constructing, and its status is questionable. And I think this is a big problem because if Azerbaijan gets Berdzor as well, this means that we don't have even a corridor with some strategic depth, and I think it will be completely insecure, and not excluding the issue of Berdzor and two other villages as well, which also could still have some Armenian population, and they still do, and where which means we are still losing territories, which we are still losing, let's say, homes. So I think opposition was not effective to prevent this. Now, generally, yes, Pashinyan has changed his tone in his statements, but not his policy. So yes, we see that his, let's say, statements around Artsakh are made in different way, much less aggressively, but the policy did not change, I assume. And he said Azerbaijan does not sign on, for example, that's what he said today or yesterday. Azerbaijan did not sign the corridor agreement. Azerbaijan did not sign on peace agreement, on demarcation agreement, and so on, which means that Pashinyan was ready to sign it. Pashinyan was ready for, let's say, these directions, which are, in my view, completely, let's say, not pro-Armenian, at least to say. But Azerbaijan tried to negotiate for more, probably, or there was some other technical disagreement. I don't know. He did not disclose it completely, but that's what we see. I mean, Azerbaijan is still trying to negotiate for more, and Pashinyan is ready to most of what he is forced to do. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move to the next topic. Last Sunday night, June 19, there was an altercation in Nigavan, a town near Aparan in the Arakazodin region, which led to a Yerevan resident shooting 7 residents of Aparan, resulting in the death of 2 and injuring 5. Some media reported that the altercation was political in nature and the shooter had fired on people who had made anti-Pashinyan statements, and then the police immediately refuted that in a report that had multiple patently false statements. The report was slammed by prominent HR activist Hrant Mikaelian, and 2 days later, the chief of the police of Aparan was fired. Okay, so what do we know about this shooting? Hrant, it's been a week. What have you heard about this? Do you know much?
Probably I don't know very much, but very much of that. But still, I'll try to give the picture I know. First of all, as much as I'm aware, 2 people have died and 6 are injured. So initially, 1 person died and 7 were injured, and then another one died out of those who were injured. So there were 8 people, and the first primary reason for conflict was not politics, but when it started to escalate, politics entered it, and then it probably had an input into the incident, because maybe it would finish without blood shelling, but it started as a criminal story, as a just street conflict, and what else can I say? What I can see is that it's just a comment already. Is that if initially the many people would expect that previous government and people which are connected to previous government own weapons and are dangerous and can shoot and so on, now we see that roles have switched, and now this government is already owning weapons, and the people who support it can be not punished. And as much as I'm aware, also we can remember the case when they hit the girl Sonam Natsakanyan with a car. The car, one of the cars of Pashinyan's escort, and no one has been punished for that. With this case, we don't know who will be punished and how big punishment will they get, but I think that's already a dangerous trend.
Hrant, do you know why the police chief was sacked?
No, not yet.
So there have been no official reasons as to why he would be fired. That's interesting. He obviously led to the conditions. He obviously allowed the conditions in which this happened, but there has been no official reason given why he was sacked. So the shooting sparked further. Yeah, the shooting sparked further opposition protests on Monday. Yet now, a week later, the circumstances of the case are still unclear. And like Melikian had said in his statement, there's a deep distrust of the course of the investigation by the police right now. Meanwhile, Pashinyan convened an emergency meeting of certain government leaders, the chief of police of Armenia, as well as the civil contract rep, many of the civil contract reps. And according to past info, he had instructed to mute the issue and remove it from the media as much as possible. Why has it been so hard to get any kind of a real information on this incident? What do you think?
Well, I only can speculate. I think, first of all, we need some more time for Insure to start speaking more. Then they might be afraid of repercussions of repressions, because in Armenian regions, the culture of relations with authorities are not same as in Yerevan, and people might be pushed, their relatives might be fired from their jobs and so on. So I think this might be part of the explanation.
We're going to have to wait and see how this incident evolves, because apparently not a whole lot of people have information about it.
I think the biggest takeaway from this whole ordeal in Aparan is that the reaction of the authorities and officials to this event, and I think you can be the judge of how that was done. But the next major topic that we want to discuss today is Artur Vanetsyan announced his resignation from the National Assembly on Tuesday. He had promised to do that, and he had promised not to return to the National Assembly. He also effectively dissolved the Pativunem alliance between his Hellenic party and Serge Sargsyan's Republican Party of Armenia, or the RPA. As far as we can tell, the alliance's membership list will remain in effect, however. So the next Pativunem member on the list will succeed him in the parliament. Hrant, do we know the reasons behind Vanetsyan's resignation? Where does this leave the opposition protests?
I think there is a big issue with Pativunem bloc, which is initially it has been, which is that it was combined from two very different groups, political groups. One is the Republican Party, which has been the ruling party for more than 15 years in Armenia, and another is the party of Artur Vanetsyan, the Hellenic Party or the Motherland Party, which is a new party, which does not have any support in population, and which does not have, let's say, organizational resources as well, which only has money. So, from what I can understand, the Republican Party had no reason to get into alliance with the Hellenic Party, except to probably financing issues. Maybe Hellenic Party had financed the joint campaign, most probably, and this is, I think, an issue because, first of all, if Hellenic Party had any input in the campaign, it was negative. And then what we saw in the parliament was that Ishkhan Zakarian, which also passed through its quote, has left the faction, the Pativunem faction in the parliament, and now Artur Vanetsyan. So it's completely failed story. Within 1 year, the bloc has failed, and I think it shows that Republican Party should have, let's say, not form an alliance with the Hellenic, and then Hellenic proved to be very weak political force. Now, concerning reasons of Vanetsyan, probably he is trying to find another way into politics. He started his rally before the joint opposition movement, but I think his motives are not always clear. and I think there might be some insider deals with some powers outside of the parliament. I cannot say much about this, but I think this is kind of political powers we don't need to have in Armenia. And one good example is, for example, that prosperous Armenia has left parliament and left politics because it also was mostly, let's say, a party which only served personal needs of some politicians, but not political agenda. And same can be said about Artur Vanetsyan and his party.
Hrant, in the last MPG poll, I think that I remember both of the political parties and the Badivunem faction polled very low, right? They were very weak. Both the RPA, both the Republicans and Hyrenik polled extremely low on the political scale.
True, in CRRC poll, which was published a bit later, they had even lower approval rate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, their approval rate is very low, and let's say passing to parliament was a big success. They did not get 7% the blocks need to pass, but since there is a point in the law that you need at least 3 factions in the parliament, they entered. So they got a chance to show up, to push their agenda into parliament, and let's say there were several successful MPs. The most successful is probably Hovik Manucharyan, but generally I don't think the bloc is performing well. And also I should note that the most prominent representatives of Republican Party did not participate in the election, did not enter the parliament, which is also a problem. So I think there is some part of the picture which we don't see, and it's not good because the party needs to be more transparent, because one of the main reasons there was so-called revolution in 2018 was that the governance was not transparent, people did not trust, but they did not improve even now.
Yeah, let me correct myself, Hrant. Just like you said, I was referring to the CRRC poll and not the MPG Gallup poll. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Hrant, I guess where does this leave the opposition protests, in your opinion?
I think opposition protests have many issues. On one hand, we can say that keeping people outside for several months, already probably a month and a half, which the protest movement took, I think it is in some way a result. And it's not a little thing, but taking into consideration that the participants in the rallies were mostly the same people, which were motivated, but the opposition was not able to motivate other people outside of the movement, even having as a fact that Pashinyan's approval rate is decreasing, slowly decreasing, but consistently, they are not able to make the protest larger. Now, part of the reason is that opposition is still not united. There are many forces which, in some cases, combat each other more than combat Pashinyan. Also, they failed work with media. They don't have very solid presentation of what they want to achieve, what they are protesting against. So many people do not understand them. It's another issue. And there are many other issues as well, but generally it's cooperation, exclusiveness of movement, which instead needs inclusiveness. So since the rallies were held mostly by the Republican party, not Republican, sorry, by the Dashnak party, which tried to avoid involving of any other people from other parties, other factions, or other politicians, and did not let anyone to participate on the scene. So that's why I think the movement failed. I think we need more inclusive movement and with more transparent goals. and much better work with modern political technologies.
Interesting. We also, we know of several large names that are aligned with the opposition, including Hovik Manucharyan, who is in jail right now, who have avoided joining the movement. When we, for instance, asked him when he was on our show a week before he got arrested, he alluded to the fact that the stage needs to clear itself before he's able to, get on the stage. So, from that, I understood that it's a two-way sort of exclusiveness. There are still the forces that are it seems like a very brittle alliance, dominated by Dashnaks, but both sides, for the more remote members of that alliance, they don't trust each other.
You mean the highest on Dashing?
Well, the highest on Dashing is the organizer, but at the minimum, there was the 5165 movement that reformed itself, called itself the Miatsum apolitical movement. So it became apolitical, and it subsumed into itself like various individuals such as Edgar Ghazarian, who's a very great orator, and he has spoken frequently during the protests, and Avetik Chalabian. So those people, for whatever reason, well, Edgar has been on the stage, but when we talked to Avetik, he said basically there seemed to be some apprehension from taking more prominent role, and that was before he got arrested.
And do you agree that it was because maybe it was too much Dashnak led?
I think he alluded to several maybe individuals who have a bad name. Similar to that, often spoken complaint that I will not go on the streets if name your former hated person. Yeah, so I don't know. That was my understanding. So
yeah, let me add a couple of points. I think there is another issue, which is that Hayastan Dashing is effectively non-working organization. Yeah. In reality, there is Dashnak Party, yes, but then there are some personalities from several patron-client groups, which do not form alliance based on ideology or something. Exactly. So they are in many ways occasionally collected in same place, but nothing more. And that's one issue. Another issue is that even other representatives of Hayastan Alliance did not participate there. And concerning so-called hated people, I think that in many cases, these people, in some cases, these people deserved, let's say, a bad image. In some cases, in some cases, they're just victims of media campaign against them. But if opposition or some people in opposition have bad image, either they need to somehow work with public opinion to improve their image, or they should try to stay away from scene, because in reality, spoiling some public image is a good tool in hand of Pashinyan to avoid the opposition getting united. And it still works, as we see. So it's another issue, and it needs to be resolved if opposition wants to achieve any kind of results.
Okay, let's move on to our final topic. Last week we discussed the leaked audio tape of Gagik Jhangiryan making thinly veiled threats to Ruben Vardazarian. He was trying to basically force him to resign as the head of the Supreme Judicial Council. So this week the saga continued. Hovik, can you give us a summary of some of the things that have happened since we last talked about it?
It is surreal to see, essentially, what's happening. But first, there was, I guess, the opposition put more pressure on the government to sack the deeply corrupt Jhangiryan. But what happened instead was that Vardazarian was finally sacked from leading the SJC Supreme Judicial Council formally. Previously, his powers were suspended, but on June 16th, the SJC held a meeting, and 9-1 voted to sack him permanently. And that's the meeting that triggered the release of the audio tape. but the person who was heard making threats, the person who was heard, boasting that he can control the judiciary, he can control the prosecutor general, and even the executive branch, is still, in power. And in fact, publicly on, Armenian national TV, Channel One, essentially he attacked the problem head on. He said, "Well, yeah, I didn't want to. How else am I going to get rid of the?" Essentially, what I understood is that he basically justified his own
Arm twisting
violations of judicial independence
Yeah.
by claiming that he wants to, straighten the system. And this is from a guy who has a reputation of being a torturer, a reputation of being, wrong in his cases. He was, so in the Mataris case, in the famous Mataris case, various Armenian courts essentially overturned the work that he did, but he still sort of proclaims that he was right. And he was blatantly heard on the audio tape saying, "Yeah, I don't want Kocharian to come to power." So he is essentially just also explaining the reason why he's interfering. And it's not about straightening the judicial system, it's about interfering in Armenia's politics. And this is all happening in February of 2021 as Armenia was gearing towards parliamentary elections. So I think the opposition is right to make the point that the entire system was set up to ensure that Pashinyan wins, and there were many court cases that resulted from the elections, and we don't know if this arm twisting by Jhangiryan changed the results of any of those court cases. But the fact that the Supreme Judicial Council voted 9-1 is astounding to me. And this is just months or the same makeup, almost the same makeup of the court has in the past voted more independently. So there is, to me, there's more evidence of unexplained changes in positions of the judges. That's really worrying.
So the victim was fired, and the offender is refusing to step down. And the U.S. aid is sending another $120 million to continue the fine democratic status of Armenia.
Pretty much.
Right.
To be honest, I don't want to claim that Vartazarian was completely without fault. Maybe he has done some things in the past but all of these things should be handled transparently and should be tried within the judicial system that is independent and that Pashinyan claims he wants to make independent, rather than twisting arms, extorting things, and making people resign.
Right. I'm putting things in the context of what's transpired in the last couple of weeks.
So the other important thing I think is worth mentioning is that the attack against Vartazarian started because after the November 9-10 capitulation, there were various opposition activists who made a fuss. Some, for instance, like Narek Montashan, for instance, they broke into the government building. And in Narek Montashan's case, he took out a flag and waved it, and they charged him for stealing state property, although he was waving the flag outside, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, courts refused to detain him, to do pretrial detention, which I think is fair because it was not a murder, it was not an assault, it was just taking a damn flag, But those cases of pretrial detention, which are almost like now a rule, where someone does something bad, they punish them by doing pretrial detention. Those severely increased after Jhangiryan intervened in the system, and that's happening while Vartazarian was suspended, and essentially. Basically, I think all the judges got the signal that you better start approving all the government requests for detention. And lo and behold, the appeals court, almost a year later, 9 months later, if I'm not mistaken, in the summer of 2021, finally jailed Montashan. And it was a great political signal to Pashinyan's opponents that you will go to jail if you misbehave.
Right. Okay, let's wrap up our topics here. It's time to see if you have any topics you want to get off your mind this week. Hrant, do you have something you want to talk about?
There is one topic which I think needs to be covered. I don't think it's too long. It's too interesting, but still important. It's that Pashinyan held the press conference, and in this press conference, 54 medias refused to participate, to send their questions to Pashinyan. So it is interesting case how media is maybe not formally but united against pressures and against limitations of free speech in Armenia. And I think it is an interesting and important case. And there were several groups of medias which joined this boycott. One group was opposition medias. Another group was pro-Western medias, and their issues with Pashinyan's press conference were different. While opposition medias were saying that we don't have anything to ask Pashinyan because we know what he will say, pro-Western medias like Civilnet or Azatutun said that they don't like format of the press conference because prior to COVID, they held press conferences where the journalists were present, and they could ask questions, and the specific questions with their wording. While now the media can only send the questions to the Prime Minister office, whereas then the Prime Minister office unites all the questions and then combines the topics of the interview. So it's more interview rather than the press conference, and it's again non-transparent. And that is why many media ignored or boycotted the press conference. So that's the news.
Thank you, Hrant. I will link to an article about this. Hovik, what's on your mind?
Bertor is on my mind, and I think it will be another critical concession that Pashinyan makes, as Hrant talked about already. But what we didn't mention was also Bertor is a critical communication route. All the electricity, all the telecommunications, all the gas that Armenia sends to Artsakh is through that route. And as we hear that the new route is going to be outside of the Lachin corridor. So those entire swaths of territory will fall under Azerbaijani control. And I think that this will essentially mean that in the future, or basically Artsakh will lose the ability to have independent communications, such as power, telecommunications, and Azerbaijan, basically anywhere that the communications is broken, they'll claim that, oh, we have an accident, and it will take weeks to fix. And in the meantime, Azerbaijan will offer, hey, we have an easy solution for you. Why don't you buy your electricity from us? Or why don't you buy your telecommunications from us? And we'll sell it to you cheaper anyway. So I think that's one of the, maybe not the primary, but probably the secondary goals of Azerbaijan taking the Lachin corridor.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Hovik, and thanks, Hrant. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our program for this episode of Groong Weekend Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's Groong, and on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.